Hello there and welcome. In the previous episode we added units to our game, so now when we have the command center we can also build a unit, and we also added this training animation and delay, and when it's done the unit will be instantiated in front of the command center. So in this episode we want to do this for the buildings as well, because at this point we can simply click on them and place them, and usually we want to have some kind of delay. We also want the UI to tell us that the building is ready, and then we can click on it again and place it on the map. So for this we're going to open our by slot script, and we're going to add a few more things that we need for this logic. So first of all, we're going to have a private bool is training to track if the building is training. We're going to have a private bool is ready to place. And we also want to have a reference to a text component that will show us if the building is ready on the UI. We can store it as a text mesh pro or just as an object, because all we want to do is enable it and disable it. And when I'm saying is training, although buildings are not actually training, this is what I mean. I mean that we are waiting for them to be ready. So I'm still using this term is training, although buildings are not actually training, but are maybe pending construction or something. So you can change the name if this bothers you. Now that we have these, we want to change our clicked on slot method, because at this point, if we click on a building slot, it will simply start the placement. But we don't want this. We want to separate this into two parts. So first of all, we're going to take this entire if and we're going to make it much bigger. So if we click on a building, we're going to have some logic, but if we click on a unit, we're going to have our usual training for the units, okay? And now inside, before we actually start placing the building, we want to do another if and check if we are not training and this training is only for the buildings. So we can even rename this to is building training. Again, you can rename it to is building in construction or something like that. But we're going to check if this is not true, and if he is not ready to be placed, then we are going to basically start the first training. So first click, start training. And inside we're going to have a few things, but if this is not true, so else if it is ready to be placed, then we're going to do what we did before and we're going to place the building. Now after we do this, we also want to reset the flags. So is ready to place will become false again, and is training will be false again, and the ready text will be set to false again. So we basically reset everything. And now we need to create some method to actually start the training. So first of all, we're going to start a coroutine, and we're going to have this start building training method. Let's just generate this, and it's going to generate this method over here. And we also want to start the build progress animation the same way we did over here. So we don't need to create anything else. We need to simply use the same one, right? So we're going to take this and we're going to run it before the training. Now this one will be the one that is assigned to the by slot. Okay, so it's going to use the same progress animation, and we're going to have the training time. And all we need to do is create this method to actually start training the building. Now, this thing over here will be a coroutine, so we're going to change this to IEnumerator, and it's going to be rather simple because all we need to do is create some kind of delay. So first of all, we set isBuildingTraining to true. We're going to have our yield return new wait 4 seconds. And this will be the training time. So we don't need to pass in the training time. We can simply use this one because it's the one that we have inside the script. And afterwards, after the training time, so basically after the unit or the building actually has been done, then we're going to set is ready to place to be true. And then this will basically happen if we click on it again. So then we're going to be able to place it if we click on the second time. So second click, place building. And over here, we also need to set our ready text to be active. So ready text, set active, true. Okay, so this is all we want to do. We want to have this training delay, and then we're going to set this bool to be true and the ready text to be active. And the next thing we need to do is to actually add this animation and add this ready text into the component, into the by slot for each building. So over here, we already did this for the infantry, right? We created this progress sprite with the build slot progress, and now we need to do the same thing for all the buildings. Let's just focus on the command center, and later I'm going to do the same thing for the other ones. So the same way we have it over here, we're going to create an image that will be the progress. We're going to click here and hold Alt and then click here to expand it, so it's going to be exactly filling this entire slot. And then we're going to change it to, let's use this thing over here. So we have this color. We can copy the color. And we have it at 74 alpha. So if you want everything to be the same, 74. Okay, and of course, we also need to add the build slot progress. And we're going to add the reference for the image. And over here, we need to add the sprite like we did before. So we have our training sprite. We're going to change the image type to filled. We're going to change this to top. And the clockwise will be disabled. So basically the same thing we did for our infantry. You can even go here and copy the component. And then go to your command center progress. Click here and say paste component values. So it's going to copy all the settings for this one to this one, okay? And that will make everything much faster. The next thing is we want to add some kind of text over here to tell us that the building is ready to be placed. So we're going to create a new UI, Text Mesh Pro. But actually, let's first create a UI image that will be the background, because if we place the text on top of this sprite, it's going to be very hard to read it because of the image. So that's why we want to have some kind of darker background. So we make it black and we make it transparent. Okay, so you can see the contrast here. Let's just zoom in. If we don't do this, then the text will kind of mix with the sprite and it's going to be hard to see. Obviously, it's going to be much smaller, so it's going to be hard to see. So first, we're going to have this background image. We're going to make it transparent a bit and black, and that's it. That's all we want to do. Of course, we can also expand it, Alt, so it's going to cover only the slot. Then we're going to take care of this text. Let's just place the background before and then the text. And for this text, we can also place it inside of the background, okay? And then click here, Alt, and it's going to be positioned inside of the slot. Then we're going to change the font to be smaller. We're going to position it in the middle. and we're going to say something like ready. So now you can see that it's easier to read because we have this black background. We can even make it a bit darker so it will be easier to see. We still want to see the actual sprite, but not like this, right? Because this is hard to see. This is a bit better, okay? And you can also change the font for the sprite, maybe make it bold, make it smaller a bit, change it to, we're not using any special font, but you can change the font. And this is how it's going to look when the building is actually ready to be placed. Okay, so now we have it inside. So again, we have the progress sprite the same way we had it for the infantry. Then we have the background inside, and inside of the background, we have the text, and that's it. Now, for the actual ready text, we're going to enable it and disable it in the code. So all we need to do is drag this background inside of it. And we don't want to drag the text itself, otherwise the background will always be active and it's going to look weird. So make sure you drag the actual background into this reference. You can even rename this to ready background, and then you can know that this should go over here. You can even go over here and rename this to ready background, so it's going to be easier, because we want the entire background with the text to be a reference and not only the text. So let's just rename this to ready background, and inside ready text. But so we don't get confused, we're going to rename this to ready background. And again, rename it with a right click, otherwise these ones will not change. Now we do want to disable this at start because it's going to be enabled only when the building is ready. Okay, so it's going to be enabled over here or disabled over here. But we want to make sure that it's first disabled at the start of the game. So this should be disabled. The progress should not be disabled because it's going to be 0 alpha at first, and only inside the code it's going to be filled. Actually, it's going to start at 1 and then it's going to be depleted. So this should be enabled, but the fill amount should be 0. Now, if you remember, we also added sounds in the previous episode, but we only used some of them. Now we also want to use this one, the building sound and the construction complete. So inside the by slot, when the building is ready over here, we can say that we want to play the construction complete sound. And for the building sound, if we go to our sound manager again, we have this building sound. We're going to play it when we actually start building. So it can be here at the beginning, or it can be here. Okay, so first we're going to have this sound of building, so we know that we started building, and then when the building is ready, we're going to have this sound building complete. Now at this point, this should work. We can even test this out. Just make sure, of course, that everything is referenced, so you have the command center and you have the ready background. Okay, we need to drag the ready background as a reference. We also need a reference to the slot progress, so we drag the progress. Just make sure we have all of these. And now inside the progress, everything is referenced and we have these. So again, we're going to do the same thing for the other buildings, but let's just see that it works.
Building.
So you can hear the building sound.
Construction complete.
And everything is working. But we're going to have a problem, and I mentioned this problem in the previous episode because the same problem will happen to the units. If, for example, we start building a unit
Training.
and we move to another tab, the coroutine will not continue because we basically disabled the entire by slot script, so the coroutine will not run. So if we go back to units, the unit basically stopped building, and the same will happen for buildings.
Building.
And obviously we want to be able to skip between these tabs. So you can see it canceled the building. And that's just because we start the coroutine and this coroutine from the by slot script. This should not happen because the by slot will be disabled when we switch between tabs, and it means that these coroutines, because they started from the script, they're simply going to be stopped or cancelled. That's why we need to make sure that the coroutines start from another place, somewhere that is not disabled at any time. So we're going to move these methods into the by system because the by system will always be available, will always be active. So we're going to first take the start building training coroutine, we're going to cut it, and we're going to move it to the by system. And we're going to place it here. Now some things will be missing because we don't have all of these available inside the by system. We have them available in the by slot. So we need to move these references somehow into the by system. And the best way to do it is by providing them as a parameter. So we can provide a training time, float training time. But we also need to provide these two, is building training and is ready to place, because these ones only exist inside of our by slot. We also need a reference to the ready background, right? So the way we can get a reference to all of them, obviously we're not going to pass each one of them here and have a very long line of parameters. This is not good. We're going to pass the thing that holds all of them, and we are talking about the actual by slot. So we're going to pass in the entire by slot as a parameter. So over here, by slot, slot. We're basically going to pass in this slot into the coroutine. And then we're going to be able to use these and change them. And you should know that unlike float, that is basically a value type, so if we change the value, it will only be changed over here. A by slot is a class, so it's a reference type. It means that if we change the value over here, it's going to be changed in the original by slot. So this is basic C#, it's not something related to Unity, and if you having trouble to understand what I just told you, you can check out my beginner's tutorial for C#. Everything will be explained to you. We go over all the different parts of C#, and you're also going to learn about reference types and value types, and this is important. Otherwise, you're going to do mistakes when you develop your game. So if this was something new for you, then you should definitely check out my C# tutorial series. So because we pass in the slot, we can simply say slot dot is building training. Now it's not going to be available because here it's private, right? So let's change it to public and also this one to public. So these ones will be available. And now we're also going to do this for the is ready to place and the ready background, because we're basically taking them from the slot, and the slot is this slot. And that's why we can pass them inside. Now, we don't want to start the coroutine from the by slot anymore, so we're going to have another method inside that will start the coroutine. So inside the by system, we're going to have a public void start building training. And this one will not be a coroutine. It will simply start this coroutine. So start coroutine. And we're going to start this coroutine. And obviously we need to provide all of these parameters. So we're also going to get them from this method and pass them inside. So it's like a bridge. But we need this bridge because we cannot start a coroutine from the by slot. Otherwise we're going to have an issue. Now, why does it? Oh yeah, because they have the same name. So let's just rename this to start building coroutine. They cannot have the same name. So this one will be start building coroutine. And we're going to start it here, okay? And all of this will happen inside the by system. And the by system is never deactivated. That's why we're not going to have issues. Then inside the by slot, we're simply going to call this method and not this method. So we're not going to start the coroutine. We're just going to start a method that will start the coroutine inside of the by system. So here, we can simply say by system start building training. And of course, we need to provide the parameters. So in order to provide this slot, we can simply say this, right? Because this is this script, is this by slot. Because we want to basically pass the by slot into this method. And then also we want to provide the training time. Now, again, we also have this problem for our units because we start the coroutine from the by slot. So we're going to create a bridge for the start unit training. Okay, so again, we're going to create some kind of bridge method, public void start unit training. And here we're just going to rename this to start unit training coroutine. And inside we're going to start this coroutine. And again, we need to pass in these things. So we need to get them from this bridge method and pass them inside. Now here we don't need any kind of reference to the by slot. That's why we're not going to pass in the by slot, right? We don't need anything from the by slot. And now that we have this bridge method, we're going to call it from the by slot. So instead of starting a coroutine, we're just going to remove it and we're going to start the method directly. Not coroutine, but start building, not building, start unit training, right? So this one is the bridge method. We can even say and this one is also a bridge method. So we have a bridge method for the building and we have a bridge method for the units. And now we can start this directly from the by system and we don't have any kinds of coroutines inside the by slot. And now we're not going to have this problem and we're going to be able to switch between tabs. Another thing we want to do is disable the interaction for the button while the item is being trained. Because if the unit is being trained, I don't want to be able to click on it again and again. Maybe later we're going to have an option to create some kind of queue so we can click multiple times on the unit and it's going to start building more and more units. But for now, if the by slot is already training, we don't want to be able to click on it again. And this will prevent us from bugs. So we are going to do this inside the start building method. Not this one. Well, actually this one. So inside the build slot progress, start building. Over here, we're going to have a reference to the game object because this is the game object. But we want to look into the parent, which is the command center, and disable the button. So we need to say get component in parent. Okay, so this is very important. We're looking into the parent of the game object, which is this game object, which is this game object, because we want to look into the parent, which is the command center. Obviously, we can also look into children if we need, but this is not relevant for this time. We want to look into the parent. And inside the parent, we're going to look for a button. And then we're going to say interactable false. So when we start training, we're going to disable the interaction for the button. But when we complete it, so we can simply copy it, when we complete it over here or over here, we can make it enabled again. Okay, so over here we disable the interaction, and here we enable the interaction. So now when a unit or a building is training, we're not going to be able to click on them anymore. The other thing that we are missing right now is to actually decrease resources when we build a unit, because when we build a building, it already happens. But what about units? Right? If we go to our placement system, where is it? Right? If we click and we start placing the building inside the placement system, inside the placement state, on action, we have this thing over here, resource manager, decrease resources based on requirements. And then we provide the database item. So we're going to copy this. We're going to copy this thing over here, and we're going to do this inside of the by slot. So inside the by slot, when we start training a unit, it's going to decrease the amount of resources. So this should happen over here. Now, don't worry about the fact that we are not checking if we have enough resources for the unit. We are actually doing this inside of the resource manager. Each time the resource is increased or decreased, for example, our harvester gathers more resources, this thing will be triggered, and then we have this event on resource changed. We also have it over here. And the one that is listening to this event is the actual buy system. Not the buy system, maybe the buy slot, I don't remember. Yes, the buy slot itself is listening to this event. And when this event is basically called, we're going to handle the resources changed. And this will basically check if our unit has enough resources. If it doesn't have enough resources, we're going to change the availability of the UI. So we did all of this in the past. This is not something new. We already have all of this. So we are in fact checking if we have enough resources for the units. We already did this before, okay? So all we need to do is decrease the resources after we start training, and we know that we have enough resources because we already do this check. If the unit is available on the UI, it means that we have enough resources. So now all we need to do is have a reference to the database, because we need to get the actual object data from the database. Now how it works, we get the object and then we go into the decrease and we loop over all the requirements for this object. And then we check and basically decrease each one of these resources. So all we need to do is get this object data from the database. And for this, we need a reference to the database. Now, it's not going to be wise to store a reference to the database inside each one of these buy slots. So for this, we're simply going to reference from the buy system, right? Because the buy system has this reference because we already used it for other things over here. So inside the buy slot, all we need to do is say buy system database, and obviously I think it's not public. Yes, it's not public. Let's just make it public. We can also make it internal, but for simplicity, let's just make it public. And now we're going to be able to access the database. So by system, database, objects data, and we need to provide the object ID so we know which object to get from the database. But we have this. We have this here. Database item ID. So let's provide it here, get the actual object, and decrease all the requirements. And that's it. Now this should work. Let's save everything and let's start. Obviously, we need to do all of this for the other ones, but it's rather simple. Let's just do this together, right? We can create a progress image, expand it. We can copy the entire image component, paste it here, and it's going to fill everything. Then we also need to add this build progress. So we're going to add the build progress and we're going to drag the image. Okay, so that's all we need to do. And obviously we also need to drag the reference for the progress into the actual slot. Then we're going to do the same for the supply center progress. We're going to copy this, paste the component, add the progress script, add a reference, and then add the reference into the supply center by slot. Then we also want to have the background and the ready text, but we don't need to do all of this all over again. We can simply copy this and paste this inside, and then paste this also here. Just make sure that it's actually centered, so click on it. You can enable it, and now it will appear on the original one. So let's just click here, Alt, and it's going to move to the actual by slot. Now we can disable it and we can drag a reference into the by slot. Let's do the same here for the supply center. You can see that it still sits on the command center because we copied it, but we simply need to click here, Alt, and it's going to move here. And then we're going to disable it and we're going to drag the reference into the by slot. Okay, so now all of them have the same functionality. And obviously, if you have more and more buildings, you should do the same. So now we're basically going to check that everything is working.
Building.
And I cannot click on it, right? As long as it's building.
Construction complete.
And we can see that it works. Remember, we have 350 and 500, and if we click on it, obviously the buildings will decrease.
Building.
But it will only decrease it. Maybe we should move the logic over here when we start training and not when we actually place it, right? Or maybe we can cancel it, right, later. But now only when we place it, it's going to reduce the resources. But this is not something new. We did this already in the past. What is new is with the units. When we build a unit, if I remember correctly, it's about 50 gold. So now when we click on the unit,
training,
it reduced. Oh, it's 25, right? So it reduced the gold.
Unit ready.
Now we are going to have a problem because our units are going to be instantiated one on top of the other because we're always instantiating them in the same spot.
Training.
And it's going to be weird because it's like we have only...
Unit ready.
Now we have two units, but they're standing one on top of the other.
Yes, sir. Agrees.
So we don't want this. To fix this, we're going to add some kind of offset to the actual instantiation process. So start building units. So inside the by system, inside the instantiate unit method, we're going to add an offset to the offset. So this is an offset, but this is an offset that is created to position them next to the entrance of the command center. So this is the entrance offset. We need to add another offset to basically randomize the spawning position. So we're going to keep this, okay? This is the spawn position. We can name it, let's just name it spawn position, or maybe rename this to entrance position. But then we want to add another random offset. So we're going to have a vector 3 random offset, new vector 3, and inside we're simply going to add randomness into each one of the axes. Okay, so we're simply going to do random range, and it's going to be a very small range. So it's going to be between 0.1 and negative 0.1. And we're going to do the same for the X, for the Y, and for the Z, okay? Now, it's going to ask you to import it, so right click and or hover, and I think it's this one, using random Unity engine random, okay? So now it's going to import this library, which is here. It's actually a namespace, not a library. And now we're going to have this small offset on top of the entrance offset. And all we're going to do is basically connect both of them. So vector 3, final spawn position, entrance position, plus random offset. And then we're going to provide the final spawn position as the position to spawn the unit. Okay? And now when we construct or train more units, they're all going to be instantiated still next to the entrance of the building, but with a small offset.
Construction complete. Training.
We can even now switch tabs. It will still work.
Unit ready.
So now the next unit
ready.
will get instantiated next to this one.
Training.
And then we can build more units.
Unit ready.
And again, you
Training.
can play around with this. You can create an animation for the units to actually
Unit ready.
spawn in the middle of the building and then just run to this position. But at this point, everything is working. Now, as I told you, we can do more and more things with the building system, with the units building system. But for now, this is all we are going to focus on. We're going to continue in the next episode with other things. And later, when we covered all the main mechanics, we can come back here and make things look a bit better. We can have queues for units. We can maybe cancel buildings. We can do other things. So that's all for this episode. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you're still not a subscriber. You can also leave a like. You can also become a member of the channel. Some of you ask me about the Discord server. Well, if I was not clear before, this is only for members of the channel. So you have to join as a paid member of the channel, and then you get the different perks. And the first perk you get is access to this Discord server. But again, it depends on you if you want to support more, if you want to get all these extra features. If not, you can just watch the videos, you can leave a like, it's free, and I'll see you next time.